The heavy wooden door of the Providence Municipal Court closed with a soft, definitive thud, sealing the room in a bubble of tense silence. Judge Frank Caprio peered over the silver rims of his glasses, his experienced eyes sweeping across the defendant standing nervously before the bench. Ana Flores held her body rigid, her knuckles white as she gripped the edges of the wooden podium, her gaze fixed on the grain of the wood as if she could divine some answer written there. The stale, recycled air hummed with the quiet expectation of consequence, a feeling familiar to every soul in the room. He adjusted the single sheet of paper before him, the official record of her transgression. "This is a citation for speeding." His voice was calm, measured, cutting clearly through the stillness. "It states that on the morning of October 12th, your vehicle was recorded traveling at 38 miles per hour in a 20-mile-per-hour school zone." He let the numbers hang in the air, their implication clear. The prescribed fine was substantial, a financial blow for anyone. The woman, Ana Flores, managed a weak, almost imperceptible nod. Her voice, when it came, was a thin, strained whisper, barely audible over the faint whir of the ceiling fans. "I know, Your Honor." Her admission was swallowed by the room's vastness. She wore a simple, worn jacket, and her hair was pulled back in a practical but fraying ponytail. The judge's discerning gaze remained on her, studying the deep-set weariness around her eyes, the tight line of her mouth. He saw the subtle tremor in her hands as she tried to steady them. His attention then drifted past her to the first row of worn spectator benches. There, a young boy, no more than 10 years old, sat perfectly still. His name was Mateo. He was small for his age, drowning slightly in a bright blue hoodie, and his large, dark eyes were fixed on his mother's back with an intensity that seemed to absorb all the light in the room. "Ms. Flores," Caprio began, his tone shifting from declarative to inquisitive. It was not an accusation, but a key searching for a lock. "The purpose of a school zone speed limit is non-negotiable. It exists for the singular safety of children. It is a protective measure, not a gentle suggestion." He paused, allowing the fundamental truth of the law to settle. "I understand, Your Honor," she repeated, her voice gaining a fragile shred of volume, though her eyes remained downcast, as if she were ashamed to meet his gaze. Caprio leaned forward on his elbows, the black fabric of his robe stretching taut. His voice softened a fraction, yet the pressure in the room seemed to intensify, focusing like a beam of light on the woman at the podium. "Tell me what happened that morning. The whole truth, please. I am listening." Ana took a sharp, shallow breath, the kind that catches in a chest tight with anxiety. She finally lifted her head, and the overhead lights caught the unshed tears glistening in her dark eyes. "It is my fault. I accept that. I was behind the wheel. I was driving too fast." The statement was a shield, a prepared confession meant to end the inquiry. But the judge's perceptive eyes had already seen the deeper story. He had noted the way the boy, Mateo, watched his mother not with childish boredom, but with a palpable, fearful anticipation. He saw the unspoken communication of guilt and worry that passed between them in the tense set of their shoulders. The real offense was not neatly printed on the traffic citation in his hand. It was something else entirely, something raw and human hanging heavily in the air between this mother and her son, a silent burden they carried together into his courtroom. Judge Caprio settled back into the high-backed leather chair, a deliberate movement that signaled a shift in the proceedings. He was no longer just an arbiter of traffic law. He had become an investigator of a deeper truth. He kept his focus entirely on Ana Flores, his expression neutral but intensely present. "Mrs. Flores," he said, his voice resonating with a quiet authority that demanded candor. "The camera records speed. It does not record reason. I need you to be completely honest with me now. Why were you speeding? What was the circumstance that led you to exceed the limit by nearly double in a place designed to protect children?" A single traitorous tear escaped the corner of Anna's eye and traced a slow, clean path down her cheek. She wiped it away with a jerky, impatient movement, as if angry at her own display of emotion. "We were late, Your Honor," she whispered, her voice cracking on the last word. "My son, Mateo, he was moving so slowly that morning. Getting dressed, eating breakfast, everything was a struggle. I was I was getting more and more frustrated. I was angry. The admission seemed to physically diminish her. Her shoulders, which had been held so rigidly, slumped forward as if the confession had released a pressure valve, leaving only exhaustion in its wake. She had laid bare a fragment of the chaotic, stressful reality of a single mother's morning. The judge's gaze, thoughtful and unwavering, took in her entire being. The defeated posture, the trembling hands, the raw honesty in her wet eyes. He now understood the dynamic at play. This was not a case of reckless disregard, but one of frayed patience and domestic pressure. His eyes then moved past her, past the podium, and locked directly onto the young boy sitting in the front row. "Son," Judge Caprio said, his voice firm but not unkind. It was a tone that brooked no disobedience, yet was devoid of malice. "Can you come up here next to your mother, please?" The boy, Mateo, flinched as if touched by a live wire. His small body went completely rigid. His wide, fearful eyes darted first to his mother's back, seeking guidance or protection, then back to the imposing figure of the judge. He was paralyzed, a small creature caught in sudden, terrifying spotlight. The low murmur of the courtroom, the shuffling of papers, the coughs from the gallery. It all ceased, and every eye turned to watch him. "Come here, please," the judge repeated, his tone leaving no room for refusal, yet his gesture was an open-handed wave, an invitation to step forward. Slowly, mechanically, Mateo pushed himself up from the hard wooden bench. His small frame seemed to shrink even further under the unforgiving brightness of the courtroom lights. He walked with hesitant, shuffling steps, each one an effort, his sneakers making soft scuffing sounds on the polished floor. He arrived at the defendant's podium and stood beside his mother, close enough to touch, but he did not look at her. He stared fixedly at the dark, polished wood of the judge's bench as if it were a great, insurmountable wall. The space between mother and son was a matter of mere inches, yet it felt like a chasm filled with unspoken words and shared anxiety. Anna risked a glance at her child, her expression a devastating mix of profound love and acute shame. She wanted to reach for him, to pull him close, but the formality of the court held her back. Caprio observed them both, this pair united in their distress. The mother, visibly burdened and now crying softly. The son, a statue of apprehension, his little hands clenched into fists at his sides. The official charge was speeding, a simple infraction. But the true case, the human case of pressure, sacrifice, and unintended guilt, was unfolding in real time right before him. He knew he had to navigate this delicate situation with immense care, for the gavel in his hand felt heavier than it ever had before. The courtroom was plunged into an almost unnerving silence, a vacuum of sound where the only thing audible was the faint, rhythmic tick of the wall clock, marking the passage of these painful seconds. All attention, from the bailiffs to the other waiting defendants, was fixed on the small boy standing beside his mother at the podium. He looked impossibly young and vulnerable against the backdrop of official state power. Judge Caprio let the silence stretch for a moment longer, ensuring he had the child's full attention. Then he looked directly at Mateo, his gaze steady and intent. "Your mother has told us she was speeding because you were late for school. Is that true?" Mateo gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. It was a movement of pure defeat. His lower lip began to tremble, and he bit down on it hard, trying to exert some control over his crumbling composure. "Why were you late, son?" The judge pressed on. His voice was clear, calm, and carried to every corner of the room, ensuring everyone heard the question. He was not bullying the child. He was methodically pursuing a truth that the boy was holding tightly inside, a truth that seemed to be poisoning him from within. What was happening that made everything move so slowly that morning? Mateo said nothing. He stared at the scuffed toes of his sneakers as if they were the most fascinating things he had ever seen. His small chest hitched with a breath he was struggling to hold in. "Look at me, please, Mateo," Caprio instructed, his voice gentle yet firm, a command that was also a request for connection. With visible effort, the boy's eyes, wide and dark with a well of unshed tears, lifted to meet the judge's. In them, Caprio saw a universe of worry, fear of the judge, fear of the situation, and most poignantly, fear of his mother's disappointment. "Your mother is here today because of a ticket," the judge explained, simplifying the complex reality for the child. "But I have a feeling, deep in my bones, that there is more to this story than just being late. I need you to help me understand. I need you to tell me what happened. Did you do something? Did something happen that made your mother so upset and made you late? The pressure on the child was now immense, a tangible weight on his small shoulders. He hunched them forward, trying to make himself smaller, to retreat into his hoodie. He was trying so hard to be brave, to stand tall like a man, but his confidence was crumbling piece by piece with every passing second. He looked like he wanted the floor to open up and swallow him whole, to escape this unbearable scrutiny. Ana Flores let out a soft, choked sound, a mix of a sob and a gasp. She put a hand over her mouth, trying to physically stifle her emotion, her own body trembling with the effort of containing her distress. Mateo saw his mother's reaction from the corner of his eye. His own face contorted with a mirroring emotion, his features twisting as he fought a losing battle against his tears. The stern, formal atmosphere of the court, with its flags and its seals and its authority, had zeroed in on his family's most private struggle, amplifying it for all to see. The judge waited, patient and still. He had created a profound silence, a void that now demanded relentlessly to be filled with the truth. Judge Caprio saw the profound turmoil playing out on the child's face, the internal war between loyalty, fear, and a dawning sense of responsibility. He leaned forward, resting his arms on the bench, his posture becoming less that of a distant magistrate and more that of a concerned elder. His expression was intent, his eyes soft but unyielding in their focus. "Mateo," he began, his voice dropping to a more conversational yet still resonant tone. "Your mother, she works very hard, doesn't she?" The boy nodded, a quick, jerky motion. The tears that had been pooling in his eyes now overflowed, spilling down his cheeks in silent, hot streams. He made no move to wipe them away. "I imagine she wakes up very early, even before the sun is up," the judge continued, painting a picture with his words, making the invisible sacrifices visible. "She gets your clothes ready. She makes your breakfast, maybe packs your lunch. She makes sure you have your homework, your backpack. She drives you all the way to school, and then, after she drops you off, she doesn't go home to rest. She goes to her own job, is that right?" Another nod, more vigorous this time, as if the boy was desperate to confirm the truth of his mother's efforts. A small, choked sob escaped his throat. "Your mother makes sacrifices for you," Caprio said, his words measured, heavy, and deliberate, each one landing with the weight of a stone in still water. "Every single day, she puts your needs before her own. She does it all because she loves you. That is what parents do. They sacrifice for their children." Ana Flores could no longer maintain her composure. She was now crying openly, her body shaking with quiet, racking sobs. She did not look at her son or the judge. She stared down at her own hands, clenched so tightly on the podium that her knuckles were bloodless, as if she were clinging to a cliff's edge. The judge slowly turned his attention to her. "Ms. Flores," he said, his voice gentle but persistent, "what is it that you do for work? How do you provide for your family?" Through her tears, she answered, her voice broken and thick with emotion. "I am a home health aide, Your Honor." She took a shuddering breath. "I care for elderly people in their homes. I help them bathe, get dressed, make their meals." "You work long hours," Caprio stated. It wasn't a question, but a confirmation of a reality he saw every day in his courtroom. "Yes," she whispered, the word barely audible. "Very long hours, sometimes 12-hour shifts." The judge let this new information settle in the silent room. He then looked back at the boy, his gaze holding Mateo's. He let the detailed picture of his mother's sacrifice, the early mornings, the physically demanding work, the tired nights, the unwavering dedication to both her son and her vulnerable patients, hang in the air, a tangible, exhausting reality. The weight of it all, of this understanding, seemed to press down physically on the small boy, bowing his head further. Mateo's composure, what little he had left, finally shattered. The dam broke. Quiet, heart-wrenching sobs shook his small frame. The sound was sharp and piercing in the profound silence of the room. The emotional pressure, built carefully and deliberately through questions and revelations, had reached its absolute peak. The confrontation was over. The realization of his mother's immense love and struggle had hit its mark, not as a rebuke, but as a profound, life-altering truth. Mateo stood weeping quietly beside his mother, who was also lost in her own storm of tears. The courtroom was frozen in time. a collective witness to this raw, deeply private moment that had unfolded on a public stage. There were no dry eyes in the gallery. The universal themes of struggle, love, and regret had transcended the specifics of the case. Judge Caprio's face, which had been a mask of judicial inquiry, now softened around the edges, revealing the compassionate man beneath the robe. Yet his tone remained grounded, serious. He looked at the boy, his voice low but clear. "Mateo," he said, "looking at your mother, seeing how hard this is for her, do you have something you want to say to her?" The child, as if moving through deep water, turned his small, tear-streaked face toward Anna. His entire body trembled with the force of his emotion. He took a ragged, hiccuping breath, his lungs fighting for air. He looked at his mother, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time, not as the source of authority or frustration, but as a person, tired and human and loving him beyond measure. "I'm sorry, Mama," he whispered, the words choked and thick with sincerity. "I'm so sorry." It was not a simple apology for moving slowly one morning. It was an apology for all of it, for the struggle, for the stress, for the long hours she worked, for every time he had not listened. It was an apology for not seeing the weight she carried every single day for him. Ana Flores broke completely. A sound, half sob, half cry of relief and love escaped her. She reached out, her arms enveloping her son in a tight, desperate, all-encompassing embrace. She buried her face in the fabric of his blue hoodie, her shoulders shaking uncontrollably. She held him as if she could absorb all his guilt and fear into her own body, as if she would never, ever let go. All the morning's frustration, the fear of the fine, the exhaustion of her life, melted away in that instant, leaving only a powerful, primal, protective love. Judge Caprio watched them, his own expression one of deep, sober thought. He gave them a long, uninterrupted moment, allowing the healing power of that embrace to fill the room. The courtroom remained a sacred space, holding the sound of their quiet, mingled crying, a sound of release and the beginning of forgiveness. He then looked down at the traffic citation, the original reason they were all here. He picked up the single sheet of paper, the symbol of a broken rule. He looked at it for a long, contemplative second, as if weighing its importance against everything that had just transpired. Then, with a decisive movement, he reached for his stamp, the instrument of his authority. He pressed it firmly onto the paper. The sound of the impact, a solid, definitive thwump, echoed in the quiet room. "Case dismissed," he said, his voice clear, resonant, and final. He did not smile. He did not offer a sentimental lecture or a trite moral. The lesson had been lived, not taught. The embrace between mother and son, the raw apology, the flood of tears, that was the true resolution, the real judgment rendered. The gavel did not need to fall. His decision to dismiss the charge was his final, silent message. Some things are more important than fines and rules. The courtroom seemed to exhale collectively, the spell broken, but the powerful image of that embrace would stay burned in the memory of all who saw it. A poignant reminder of the complex human stories hidden behind every case file.